In 2025, the world's longest undefended border, stretching over 5,500 miles, became an unexpected front line. What was once a symbol of peace and cooperation now bristled with tension, uncertainty, and fear. Tensions exploded between two nations once considered inseparable allies. Decades of friendship and shared history seemed to unravel overnight, as ordinary people found themselves swept up in a storm of suspicion and anger. President Donald Trump, in his controversial second term, launched an aggressive campaign to reshape global trade. His administration doubled down on protectionism, vowing to put American interests above all else, no matter the cost to old alliances. Across the border, Canada's new Prime Minister Mark Carney rose on a wave of national defiance. Carney, a former central banker, became a symbol of hope for Canadians determined to stand their ground and defend their sovereignty. This was not a war of soldiers, but of tariffs, threats, and identity. Trade routes that had been open for generations were suddenly choked by new restrictions, and the flow of goods slowed to a crawl. Trump's rhetoric turned openly hostile, calling Canadians freeloaders, threatening economic ruin, and even floating the idea of annexation. His words echoed across social media, fueling outrage and deepening the divide. These weren't just words, they struck at the heart of Canadian sovereignty. For many, it felt like an attack on their very identity, and a challenge to everything the two countries had built together. The world watched in disbelief as the partnership unraveled, exposing deep vulnerabilities in the global order. Allies and rivals alike wondered what would come next. Trump's America First doctrine faced its ultimate test. Could the United States truly stand alone, or would the cost of isolation prove too high for even the world's largest economy? Carney, representing a nation that felt betrayed, rallied Canadians with a message of resistance and unity. He called for resilience, urging citizens to weather the storm together. The standoff forced both countries to confront the fragility of their bond. Families were divided, friendships tested, and the sense of North American unity was shaken to its core. Markets trembled, supply chains broke, and families on both sides felt the strain. Everyday life was disrupted as shelves emptied and businesses struggled to adapt to the new reality. Businesses faced uncertainty, citizens questioned the future. The economic shock rippled through communities, leaving many to wonder if things would ever return to normal. The events of 2025 proved how quickly trust can fracture under political pressure. Headlines changed by the hour, and leaders scrambled to contain the fallout. Two leaders, two visions, reshaping the destiny of North America. The choices they made would echo for generations, forever altering the relationship between neighbors and the future of the continent itself. Early in Trump's second term, the U.S. imposed sweeping 25% tariffs on Canadian cars, steel, and aluminum. The move was a direct economic assault, justified as protection for American jobs. For Canadians, it felt like a betrayal. The integrated auto industry was thrown into chaos. Trump's rhetoric escalated, threatening to tear up trade deals and even annex Canada. His strategy was intimidation, but it backfired. As Trump's attacks intensified, Canadian public opinion shifted. The election became a referendum on standing up to the U.S. Instead of caving, Canadians united in defiance. The search began for a leader who would defend Canada's honor. That leader emerged in Mark Carney, a former central banker with global credibility. Trump's intervention had created his own worst nightmare. The 2025 Canadian election was widely predicted to be a straightforward conservative victory, with most polls and pundits forecasting a comfortable win for Pierre Poilievre and his party. The political climate seemed stable, and many Canadians expected little drama. Pierre Poilievre led comfortably, until a sudden escalation in Trump's trade war with Canada upended the race and sent shockwaves through the political landscape. As Trump's aggressive tactics dominated headlines, Poilievre's perceived alignment with the former U.S. president became increasingly toxic, raising doubts about his ability to defend Canadian interests. Across the country, Canadians demanded a leader who would stand up to U.S. bullying and protect national sovereignty, sparking protests and heated debates. Into this turmoil stepped Mark Carney, a respected former central banker with a reputation for steady leadership and global experience. His entry electrified the race. Calm, credible, and unflappable, Carney projected confidence and offered a steady hand in crisis, quickly winning over voters who craved stability and expertise. His message was clear and resonant. Canada's sovereignty was not for sale, and he would not be intimidated by foreign pressure. Public opinion shifted almost overnight. The Liberals surged in the polls as Canadians rallied behind Carney's vision of an independent, assertive Canada. The election transformed into a national stand against foreign interference, uniting Canadians across political lines in defense of their democracy. On election night, Carney's Liberals achieved a stunning majority, defying all expectations and rewriting the political map. The result was a direct rebuke to Trump's tactics and a powerful statement of Canadian independence on the world stage. Jubilant crowds filled the streets, celebrating a new era of defiance over submission and a renewed sense of national pride. Carney's victory marked a dramatic turning point in US-Canada relations, signaling a willingness to challenge American influence and assert Canada's interests. The era of quiet diplomacy was over, replaced by a bold, more confrontational approach to international affairs. As Parliament prepared for a new session, it was clear, a new confrontational chapter in Canada's history had begun, with Mark Carney at the helm. On election night, Carney delivered a speech that echoed worldwide, sending shockwaves through political circles both at home and abroad. The atmosphere in the room was electric, with every eye fixed on the stage, anticipating what would come next. It was not a typical victory address, it was a declaration of independence, a bold statement that Canada would no longer be defined by its southern neighbor. He acknowledged the external pressures that had weighed on the nation for years, and drew a line in the sand, making it clear that the status quo was no longer acceptable. Without naming Trump directly, Carney accused the US of trying to break Canada's spirit, referencing years of trade disputes and political interference. "That will never, ever happen," he declared, his voice unwavering as the crowd erupted in thunderous applause and cheers that seemed to shake the very walls. He promised to defend Canadian sovereignty at all costs, vowing that the nation's values and independence would never be compromised, no matter the pressure. Carney signaled a dramatic shift, declaring that the era of US-centered trade was over, and that Canada would no longer be bound by old agreements that no longer served its interests. Canada would seek new alliances, forging partnerships across the globe, and chart its own course in the world economy, independent and self-assured. The speech was both a rallying cry to Canadians and a warning to Washington. The days of quiet compliance were over, and a new era of assertiveness had begun. For the first time in generations, Canada was setting its own agenda, unafraid to challenge the old power dynamics and ready to lead on its own terms. The world took notice. Carney emerged as a formidable new leader, his words making headlines and sparking debate in capitals around the globe. His words marked the start of a high-stakes diplomatic chess match, with every move watched closely by allies and rivals alike. The victory speech was more than just rhetoric. It was a turning point in Canadian history, a moment that would be remembered for years to come. Canada was no longer in America's shadow. It was ready to step into the light, confident and unafraid, with Carney leading the way. The first Trump-Carney meeting was highly anticipated. The world expected fireworks after months of hostility. Yet inside the Oval Office, Trump's demeanor changed completely. The belligerence vanished. He greeted Carney warmly. Trump praised Canada, referencing family ties and shared history. There was no mention of tariffs or threats, just friendly overtures. Observers were stunned by the sudden shift. Was it a calculated tactic or a response to Carney's strong mandate? The public feud was replaced by a private display of friendship. But beneath the smiles, the real conflict simmered. No one knew which Trump would emerge next. The uncertainty left both nations on edge. The meeting changed the tone, but not the underlying issues. The future of the relationship remained deeply uncertain. While leaders postured, the economic pain was real. US tariffs devastated North American supply chains. American companies like GM faced billions in extra costs. Small businesses struggled to survive as import prices soared. The tariffs meant to protect jobs were destroying them. Canada retaliated with its own tariffs, targeting key US goods. The tit-for-tat escalation hurt consumers everywhere. Canadian shoppers launched a grassroots boycott of American products. Grocery stores swapped California tomatoes for Italian ones. The boycott reflected a deep shift in sentiment. Economic ties frayed not just by policy but by personal choice. The partnership that once bound the nations was unraveling. Ordinary citizens felt the impact in their daily lives. The trade war was no longer abstract, it was personal. The brief goodwill from the White House meeting quickly faded. Tariffs remained, and economic pain deepened. By late June, Trump threatened to end trade talks entirely. The hope for resolution vanished. The rift became a new reality. Trust, the bedrock of US-Canada relations, was shattered. Diplomatic channels fell silent. Suspicion replaced cooperation. The conflict fueled unity in Canada but also stoked regional tensions. In Alberta, separatist sentiment surged, with some looking south for support. Carney now faced a crisis on two fronts: external pressure and internal division. The trade war was no longer just about economics, it was about identity and the future of the Canadian state. The historic alliance was in danger of total collapse. The events of 2025 have forever changed US-Canada relations. The image of friendly neighbors has been replaced by wary rivals. Tariffs and rhetoric have severed decades of goodwill. Canada is now diversifying, seeking new alliances beyond the US. The lessened dependence on one partner is a vulnerability. For America, the limits of transactional foreign policy are clear. The trade war created a more unified, determined Canadian adversary. The future is uncertain. Will trust ever be rebuilt? One thing is certain, the border now feels wider than ever. North America faces a new, unpredictable era shaped by the choices of 2025.